What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. First of all, I just want to say I'm sorry that this has taken so long for me to upload in a while. I know I've been kind of incognito for the past month or so. I've just been really busy between work, relationships, just life in general. But I'm here now, and I'm here to talk about the Peacemaker Season 2 series, or I guess season, I guess you could say. And this will be a spoiler-ish review. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I'm going to try to avoid talking about the finale and going into a lot of detail about that. But, you know, there will be some discussion of things that might be considered potential spoilers. So I'm just going to go ahead and give it a blanket spoiler warning. So if you haven't seen all the episodes of Peacemaker Season 2, go back, watch those, and then come back and we'll discuss this really great season of TV, actually. I think this was actually a very solid follow-up to the first season. I think in some ways it's even a better season, per se. It was a really excellent character study into one of DC's most complex anti-heroes. I think this was without a doubt John Cena's best performance, maybe even of all time. Like, not just his best Peacemaker performance, but probably his best performance in his acting career. He does such a really great job conveying various complex emotions, and just kind of going off of that, I think all of these other actors do a great job as well. Harcourt, who is played by James Gunn's wife, I can't remember her name, but she really does a great job as well. Kind of explores a lot of trauma and guilt with her character, similar to Peacemaker. So the two play off each other nicely in terms of the thematic material and the messaging and whatnot. Vigilante, likewise, he's not in it as much as some people might think, especially in the first half of the season, but he does get quite a bit to do as the season progresses into the second half. And it's not as potent as, say, Peacemaker's journey, but it's still really good at the end of the day. And again, he turns in a great performance. And of course, the 11th Street kids are back. I can't think of her name as well, but it's what is her name? Amanda Waller, her daughter. Apologies about that, guys. But yeah, Amanda Waller's daughter, she's back. The other guy as well. And so yeah, you just have all the 11th Street kids back. All the actors do, again, such a wonderful job. And they really go through a lot. They really have kind of their own enmity with one another. They're kind of having to come off of their biggest mission yet in Season 1, dealing with the butterflies and all that. So it's just really great to kind of see, especially in the first episode or two, kind of where all these characters are at, how their journey so far have affected them, and kind of their reaction of things just going on in this DC universe in general. And speaking of universes, I think this is a story that I think is one of the best uses of the multiverse I've seen in anything DC or Marvel. It cleverly uses the multiverse to tell a very human-focused story of grief, overcoming loss, and facing trauma, as opposed to using it for just cheap fan service, which I'm a sucker for fan service, especially when it's done right. But let's be real, the closest we've gotten to that in maybe the Marvel Cinematic Universe, for example, would probably be Loki. I feel like that was maybe the only story that really kind of gave us a multiverse that was more used to tell a character-driven story than just used for fan service. And I feel like Peacemaker does that, but maybe even better in certain areas. So yeah, I just really like that whole dynamic. I love that the multiverse was used to tell, again, a human-focused story, and this whole idea of grief, overcoming loss, all of that is played through Peacemaker and how he's trying to basically relieve his past and start over through a new universe, and kind of this quite literally escape from reality. So again, just very well done. And I know I mentioned Harcourt earlier, and I do think that kind of how I mentioned a second ago, how she bounces off John Cena's Peacemaker very well, and they have very similar things they're struggling with and going through. I think she is by far the second most compelling character in this season. Again, just that complicated relationship with Chris that I think makes for a really engaging subplot, and one of the most engaging subplots in the entire season. And I will actually go on a limb and say something I wasn't expecting to say before watching this season, but this might be, surprisingly enough, James Gunn's most mature and serious project to date. There's a lot of moments that really just let you sit and soak in the emotional intensity of the moment. I mean, you could argue Guardians 3 did that, you could argue Peacemaker Season 1 did that, even Superman, but I feel like here, there are just moments where, and of course there is humor here sprinkled in throughout, but I do feel like here was where James Gunn locked in and he said, hey, this could be, and I think he's even on record for saying this was like his favorite project that he's done so far, which I'm going to get into a little bit why I kind of think that, but kind of don't think that. But yeah, I really feel like he did a really good job of kind of balancing humor, emotion, even more so than normal. And it's a lot more serious than I think a lot of people are going to expect when they hear James Gunn attached to any project. I mean, I think it's more serious than Superman, and I thought he did a really good job at balancing all the emotional weight and humor and action in that movie. But I think it's done even better here. The new intro, it does feel a little different at first, and it can feel very off-putting if you're used to season 1's very amazing opening sequence from Wigwam's Do You Want to Taste It, that dance number. So it did kind of throw me off at first, but I will say after the first couple episodes, I think I may actually prefer it to season 1's opening, honestly. Like, I just really got used to that song by the end. And if they do a season 3, which I don't know if they're planning to or not, but if they do down the road, I'm sure James Gunn will come up with something just as cool as the first 2 and maybe even top it. But for now, I think I'm willing to say season 2's opening intro I like more than the first one, but that's just more personal taste. I get that. And again, this season as a whole is much more of a character study for both Chris and the 11th Street kids in general as a whole, as opposed to a more traditional action-oriented adventure. In fact, Peacemaker himself doesn't actually suit up a lot in this season. There's maybe only a couple of 2 to 4 episodes max where he does, so that might be shocking to some, and I do wish we could have seen a little bit of Chris actually being the Peacemaker, but I do think what we got was a nice trade-off in terms of the character development that we see him go through. And moving on to the more mixed aspects, I will say the first time I saw the finale on first viewing, I wasn't a massive fan, and I do think that does have something to do with the massive overhyping that James Gunn himself did in regards to cameos and massive reveals that he was teasing for DC's future, and not to mention it was coming off episodes 6 and 7, which in my opinion were 2 of the best episodes of maybe any live action DC show I've ever seen. But I did watch it a second time. That's kind of why the review's late, because I waited like a week to rewatch that finale, just kind of let my thoughts sink in, and then obviously other stuff happened. But yeah, I feel like, late review is in part to the fact that I didn't really know how to process the season as a whole until I gave that finale another shot, kind of not having any lofty expectations. And seeing it a second time and seeing how it, seeing it in context to the broader picture that James Gunn is trying to paint here, I do feel like it plays much better, again, without those massive expectations that were placed on the show. I think the character moments, they do work beautifully, and they really help tie the season's themes together in a meaningful and mostly satisfying manner, as well as some emotional payoff for certain characters' relationships with one another. It does feel like the season tries to cheat on an overarching narrative in the traditional sense, but I will say the show, again, it's never feels like it's meant to be as massive as fans were led to believe, but again, more of that character-driven narrative that I think really works in the end. But yeah, I do think, if anything, I feel like episode 7 really should have been the climax of this series, and if you've seen the show, you're going to know what I'm talking about. It concluded the whole alternate dimension storyline, and it was really satisfying, very, very emotional, impactful. And episode 8 really just feels like the falling action or resolution. One could even call it kind of the epilogue of the series as a whole. But yeah, going on to what I didn't like about this series that I just think straight up didn't work, I will say the midpoint of the season, it largely involves a kind of break-in into Chris's home and a subplot involving Eagly that, in my opinion, never felt as compelling as the main storyline that was unfolding. And kind of going off of that as well, I do feel like, kind of what I mentioned earlier about the finale, I feel like the season could have used at least one more episode to wrap up a certain cliffhanger in episode 7. I'll just leave it at that, and it never really gets resolved. And especially since Gunn himself came out and said that season 3 is not a guarantee, I really feel like they should have had at least one more episode to kind of bring everything back full circle. And I also additionally feel as though Chris himself, Peacemaker, he doesn't exactly get a full-fledged arc, in my opinion. And when you see the show again, if you haven't seen it already, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about, most likely. But yeah, I mean, all that to say, despite the negatives, they're not deal-breaking for me, despite a finale that I think was massively overhyped. Again, I do think it succeeds in character moments, and as a whole, that's where this season of television really, I think, goes from being really good to borderline great. Again, it's an excellent character study for our protagonists. It has some really cool action scenes, really great musical numbers, as James Gunn is always known for, some very in-depth, critical, emotional moments that will probably leave a tear streaking down your face, quite frankly. And then just, the visuals, all of that, it just all looks very polished. Again, I love the whole kind of exploration of using the multiverse to tell a human-centric story. So it's all really well done, and I do think if the finale had been a bit stronger and maybe we had one more episode to fully wrap everything up and kind of complete Chris's character journey, I think this would be James Gunn's best project to date. The first 7 episodes, I think, are spectacular. Again, the midpoint kind of feels like a subplot that's not quite as interesting as the overall story, but it's still really good. And again, I just don't think they tied that together in the finale as well as they meant to. But overall, I'm going to give it a 8 out of 10. I do think it's a pretty great episode, or great season of television as a whole. So if you haven't seen Peacemaker, I would definitely, or Peacemaker Season 2, but even Peacemaker Season 1 for that matter, I'd recommend going to check it out. It, once again, is a pretty bold step in the right direction for DC, and I'm starting to get more and more anticipated for what James Gunn has in store for the future. Can't wait for everything coming out next year in 26, especially Lanterns. But yeah, just let me know, guys, in the comments down below. What did you think of Peacemaker Season 2? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Are you kind of indifferent? And if this hasn't sold you on the DC universe as a whole, I'm curious to know kind of where you are in general with where the DCU is heading. I certainly don't think it's perfect, but I'm definitely, again, very optimistic to see what the future has in store for this or what James Gunn has in store for the future of this franchise. So yeah, that's all I got for today, guys. As always, please be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and share this video, and I will catch you all later. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. If you liked what you've seen here and you want to see more, please feel free to like, subscribe, share, and check out my other videos in the link in the description down below, and I will see you all later.